Hello and welcome to the breakout session, Successful District Operations. I'm Candace Avenanti, NACD Southeast Region Representative and moderator of this session. During this session, the Oregon Association of Conservation Districts will share how their districts have received funding through different legislative efforts and the tools they use to meet local resource needs. We'll also hear about the experiences of New Jersey's Burlington County soil conservation districts and what they've done to provide municipal separate storm sewer system, or MS4, compliance services within their community. During these presentations, you're invited to use the chat feature to ask the speakers questions. Our first speaker is Jan Lee. Jan is the Executive Director of the Oregon Association of Conservation Districts. She has been an Executive Director of Natural Resource Associations for over 25 years. She is a former chair and board member of the association and a former NACD board member. She served as an Oregon legislator in the past and actively works with state and federal agencies and lobbies on behalf of OECD. Please remember to share your questions for Jan using the chat feature. And Jan, the virtual floor is yours.
Good afternoon. I'd like to share with you two programs that we've developed in Oregon that have been very helpful for our districts in providing financial resources and the ability for the districts to grow. One of them is a tax-based program, and the other is based on our lottery funding. The benefits of the tax-based revenue are that they provide a permanent, sustainable district funding source, while they also allow the ability to increase programs and services fairly significantly. And they create a higher district profile for our districts. You see here the sign of the Clackamas Soil and Water Conservation District, which is about an hour from Portland. 10 years ago, we did not have a tax base. We had about $100,000 budget with 2 employees. And then we developed the ability to get our tax base passed. And currently, as a result, we have 15 employees and about $3 million a year in income. In Oregon, there are 45 soil and water conservation districts around the state. And we all worked together in 1983 to go to the legislature, along with the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Revenue, to enable us to be able to have tax bases. We are special districts and local governments in Oregon as districts. The first district approval for a tax base occurred actually in 1986 in Yamhill County. And the last one was approved just this last November down in the Eugene area. Right now, we have 14 districts between 1986 and 2020 that have approved tax bases. The revenue that comes in as a result is about $80,000 in a small county with a minimal population and ratchets up to $6.4 million a year in larger counties with higher populations. And if we look at our 14 districts, the average is close to $2 million a year in income for the districts. The tax rate per thousand of assessed property value can be your choice, and the values that we have in place range from 3 cents to 10 cents right now. We had to get our legislative authority in place to be able to have this program available for the districts. And there's actually 2 different options. You can do a permanent tax rate, which once you establish remains the same, or you can do a tax base that's tied to a specific project in a specific number of years. And alternatively, you can also have a permanent tax base and then go for an additional option tax base if you so decide in the future. So really the first step in getting this accomplished is getting out in the community, talking to the various partners, local governments and others. In Oregon, staff cannot lobby, so we had to send our board members out to these organizations to tell our story and why this was important, why it was a need that needed to be developed. We went to chambers of commerce, to the political parties, to the Lions Club, almost any place there was a forum. So after we built up support for going forward with the tax base over about a year, we then asked the county to place it on the election ballot. And we were successful, so that was great. Election results have varied by county, but the general trend has been about 60% of the county population has approved those that are in place. What's interesting, though, is that the vote has been higher in urban areas of the county rather than rural. We thought it would be higher in rural areas because soil and water districts have generally served most of the rural population in the past. But the urban and city areas really liked the idea of conservation per se, and they were the major supporters. Most of our districts in Oregon provide both urban and rural services. The other program that we put into place was funding conservation through the lottery. Back in 1987, the legislature actually put together a group called the Governor's Watershed Enhancement Board, and it funded some conservation projects, but it was done rather sporadically, and there wasn't a program you could really count on. In 1997, as some of you across the country may have heard, the salmon were listed just prior to that, and so we had then a developed Oregon plan for salmon and watersheds legislatively, and some funding was set aside for that. That particular piece of legislation also promoted what is called a watershed council. Those are voluntary organizations, unlike our 45 SWCDs, which are actually local governments. But we work together with other entities to develop work under the salmon plan. In 1998, we decided we wanted this program, a new program, to be in place where we would have funding that could be more predictable. So Measure 66 in 1998 provided lottery dollars would be provided 7.5% to conservation projects and 7.5% to parks and recreation. But that initiative had a sunset in 2014 because everyone was a little anxious about how the program would work, and they wanted to be able to review it and see if it should go forward in the future. That initiative also established the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, or as we call it, OWEB, and that is a state agency at this time. In 2010, we saw that the sunset was coming down the road, so all kinds of organizations across the state got together and promoted Initiative Measure 76. It allocates the same percentages, but it limits what the legislature can do in regard to the funding. It also makes the program permanent, which was the main idea of that initiative. One of the things that we found under the older initiative was that the legislature was taking a lot of the money and backfilling staff positions at natural resource agencies. So one of the conditions of ballot measure 76 was that 65% would be dedicated entirely to grants, and that staff for OWEB and staff for Fish and Wildlife and other agencies working in the program would only be allowed at the rate of 35% controlled by the legislature. So this program has really worked well. We had a 20th celebration for the birthday about a year ago. This is just another rendition of the timeline. And OWEB's mission is to help protect and restore healthy watersheds and natural habitats that support thriving communities and strong economies. OWEB's work is watershed-based. It covers all of our watershed areas in Oregon, 20 major watersheds, which are divided into 6 regions for OWEB staffing support. You can see here some of the items that go into the program, like the strategic plan, the spending plan, the various grant procedures. And there is a loop that's created then to the ecological outcomes, which you see here, like salmon recovery, water quality. And then as a result of grants that are provided, those programs are assessed every 2 years, and there's an adaptive loop back to the process to see if there needs to be a change in any of the procedures. OWEB has a board. There are 5 public at-large members from various regions of the state. They are appointed by the governor and approved by the legislature, confirmed by the Senate. I was on their board prior to taking this position, which then became a conflict because couldn't ask for money. So I resigned in order to make sure OACD could get all of the resources available to it. There are 5 other members who are from natural resource commissions, like Fish and Wildlife, Department of Agriculture, and a tribal rep. And those 11 people actually vote. They vote to determine what money will be dispersed for various projects. And then there are 7 ex officio members from various federal agencies like US Forest Service, NRCS, BLM, and others. So currently we have a biennial budget of $139 million that comes into OWEB. 2/3 of that is lottery money. And here in Oregon, we get about another 1/3 from the federal Salmon Dollars program. So we have about 90 million then from lottery and about 45 million annually from the salmon plan, and 3 million miscellaneous income from other resources. Right now, there's about 1,300 open grants with a balance of around 85 million. Normally, there's about 1,500 applications executed in a biennium. Right now, we're sitting on applications of about 59 million, and there are 4 grant cycles a year, so there continue to be ongoing opportunities. One of the other sources of income is our salmon plates. Our prison system develops these plates, and then all of the revenue comes back to OWEB, about $300,000 a year. Here you can see how the grants break out. With 105,000 in the prior biennium, 2017 to 2019, there was about $105 million, and that leveraged another 126 million. And you can see where that matching resource came from by sector on the second pie chart. These are just some of the metrics that are accomplished under that program. There's a lot of fish screen and fish passage work. Landowners may have diversions in the stream that can be replaced with a fish-friendly culvert or a small bridge. Lots of riparian mileage and streamside planting and other various programs. For our districts, we have quite a range of programs that are covered under OWEB. Weed control is really important. Some of our districts are actually the county weed program. Again, fish passage. Our biggest program over the last couple years has been sage grouse habitat. We have funding both from NRCS and from OWEB, over $1 million each, to provide districts the money to work with landowners so that they can have conservation agreements. So if the sage grouse is listed, which it could be in the future as its population is diminishing, then those people who have those 30-year agreements would be protected. We also have a program for acquisition of land and water for easements or for ownership of land. Our own district purchased a 719-acre forest 2 years ago with a grant from US Forest Service, as well as money from other folks and our own funding of about half. That has been a demonstration project for us, so we can take the land that was left by the timber company in not so great condition and restore it and protect the stream that runs through it. Focused investment partnerships include partners in a basin, so they are very large projects with lots of people participating. Water quality is important. There are monitoring programs. We currently have a monitoring program for the sage grouse. You can see the various kinds of restoration that are covered under this program. Our newest program is the Oregon Agriculture Heritage Program, which provides for funding of easements and acquisitions that protect working lands. That program is not fully funded yet, but we're looking at that coming around the corner. It also provides succession planning for farm and landowners. Districts receive capacity grants from OWEB, as do watershed councils and some others. So each of our districts receives $83,315 annually, and they can use that for water quality management plans, for habitat restoration, or for other planning and technical needs. They're just required to develop a long-term plan and an annual plan with quarterly reports showing the work that's accomplished. The newest program we have is the strategic implementation. There's about 1.6 million set aside for that in this biennium, with each district able to receive up to 100,000 if they have a project and 40,000 for monitoring. So we've done 27 of the SIAs over the last 5 years with significant water quality improvements. It also helps districts tell the story of how they work with landowners. That's a voluntary program with the landowners. Only the Department of Ag has enforcement authority. There's also a capacity grant for a partnership. The Oregon Conservation Partnership is made up of 4 state associations: the Network of Oregon Watershed Councils, the Land Trust, us, and the Employees Association. So there are 29 land trusts that are our partners, 57 councils, our 45 districts, and our employees. We receive $250,000 a year for our state association, and that pays for some of the executive director's salary. It pays for travel, coordinates activities and programs among our 4 associations. We have a part-time public relations firm in Portland that gets media asks out for us. It's been very successful. And we're able to work together to lobby with state and federal organizations, both for resources for our members and for programs. We do monthly webinars. We have a number of workshops and an annual conference. So this has really been great for the members of our 4 organizations. And with that, I've given you a fairly broad overview of what we're doing here. And I'd be glad to answer any questions or have you contact me later.
Thank you, Jan, for sharing Oregon's efforts to establish a tax base and the work of OWEB. It's really great to hear about these efforts and the partnerships that support them. Bob Reitmeyer is our next speaker. Bob is the district manager of the Burlington County Soil Conservation District, a role he has served in since 2011. He is a lifelong resident of Southern New Jersey and a graduate of Stockton State College with a bachelor's degree in environmental science. Bob began his career with the district in 1997 as a site inspector, and he was promoted to natural resource specialist in 2001, prior to his current role. Outside of work, Bob enjoys duck hunting and carving duck decoys, and I see some of them behind you right now, Bob. We invite you all to type your questions for Bob in the chat, and Bob, I'll turn it all over to you. We're all yours.
Okay, so this is the program I put together, this presentation. The program I'm very proud of, but so our MS4 compliance program. I think it's important to first kind of give a little background on what the soil conservation districts in New Jersey are. Originally we were ag-centered, as with all soil conservation districts. But in 1975, we were charged by the state of New Jersey with the implementation of the Soil Erosion and Sediment Control Act. And what that did was it made us responsible for reviewing and ultimately approving most construction projects in New Jersey. Our lowest threshold for soil disturbance is 5,000 square feet, so that's not very large. You know, that can sometimes be a pool, a deck, but it ranges all the way up to a 50-lot subdivision or a 50-acre commercial site plan. And we are in, after we review these plans, we're also responsible for inspecting these active construction projects. And that's important because the program that we're going to get into and discuss further, we rely on that expertise in having inspected a variety of different construction projects and also stormwater basins to be able to look at some of these basins as they're 10, 15, 20 years old and have an idea about how they should be functioning or should have been functioning. We do remain an active partner with USDA NRCS, and they are located here in the building with us. We do not receive taxpayer funding, so we do have to kind of be a little bit entrepreneurial. We are currently a staff of 5. We have 3 that have, say, site inspection responsibilities, and then 2 administrative folks. Just a little further background, we have our standards in New Jersey, vegetative standards, engineering standards. The engineering standards include, methods to construct basins, how they function, conduit outlet protection, downstream stabilization, downstream stability. So that is what we rely on. So the first thing we might have is a stormwater management report, and that will tell us, that's from the engineer, will indicate how the basin is supposed to function, how much water it's going to hold, how it's going to release it. And then we have our actual soil erosion plan, which will indicate the measures to be implemented during construction. This is a prior presentation I put together showing something of a virtual inspection. Just going to backtrack here. So we spent a lot of time, in the field, meeting with the responsible parties on site, discussing their projects. We're not a land use authority, so we don't get to determine whether a construction project should go forward or not. We just look to see that it's done in the most responsible fashion. So just as an example of, what we see on the construction end, we will see these new structures placed, early on in construction. And so we see them as they go in. We see them during construction. So we know, what we're looking for. Same thing with the riprap channel. So if you have an idea how it started and you stumble upon something that's similar 15 years later, you can kind of identify, hey, is this working right or is it not working right? Is there an issue here? Again, this is riprap channel, which is actually a basin discharge down to a stream. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the stream is down right there at the very top end there. This is a head wall delivering water into the basin, and the riprap, what we call conduit outlet protection in front of it, is scour protection to prevent the basin bottom from eroding. You can kind of see that there's a water line there. That basin did serve as a sediment control basin and was holding water for a bit of time. So later on in this program that we're talking about, MS4, when you start to see water lines, you may have an idea that, well, this was holding water for some time period. Is it still, should it still? Just another structure. So, we're on these job sites on a near daily basis, and we see a great variety of stormwater management basins, infiltration basins, retention basins, wet ponds, dry ponds, ponds with low flow channels, sediment basins. So we get to see quite a variety. But at the, our goal here is to reduce erosion through proper stabilization. Short term, we're looking to eliminate this or minimize this type of sedimentation during the construction. Long term, those basin outfalls, they can become an erosion problem that lasts for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Once they're installed, very few people actually ever go back to take a look at them. And if there's a problem there, it's not going to be discovered without some sort of inspection. So with all that being said, what is MS for? It's Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, and that incorporates a municipality's storm sewer inlets, their basins, their culverts, any other kind of outfalls, and any other stormwater conveyance, roadside ditches, that sort of thing. The NPDES permit program, created in 1972 under the EPA's Clean Water Act, was put together to help address water pollution by regulating point sources as they discharge pollutants to the waters of the United States. Many states receive a status of delegated, which assigns their compliance responsibility to the state. Probably 2/3 of the states in the nation have this current delegated status. In New Jersey, this delegated responsibility rests with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. So the municipalities in the state are required to have a stormwater management plan and a stormwater ordinance, and file an annual report with the state of New Jersey to make sure, or to verify, that their MS4 is in compliance. Some examples of MS4 compliance requirements are to ensure that there's adequate post-construction operation and maintenance of stormwater management facilities owned or operated by the municipality. In New Jersey, some municipalities will take ownership of stormwater basins after construction has been completed. And in other cases, those stormwater basins remain the responsibility of a homeowners association, and in some cases, actually the responsibility of the property to which the basin is attached. So that might be just one homeowner, might be charged ultimately with maintaining the basin for the entire subdivision. Another example is to ensure that adequate post-construction operation and maintenance of stormwater management measures are provided for properties not owned or operated by the municipalities. These can be your commercial properties. They are also required to make sure that they perform their own inspections and that they're not discharging any pollutants into the municipal storm sewer system. There are also requirements for stormwater structure mapping to include storm sewer inlets, stormwater management basins, and basin outfalls or other outfalls and culverts. And again, to provide an annual report. In New Jersey, there's there is a breakdown between municipalities. There's Tier A, which generally have more requirements, and Tier B, which have slightly less based upon location and population. In New Jersey, there's about 400 Tier A and about 100 Tier B. So how the districts became involved. In 2017, the New Jersey Department of Agriculture, which we do report to, identified that soil conservation districts were well positioned to provide certain assistance to municipalities and or private entities for their MS4 permit requirements. This was based upon our expertise in our inspection program. Here in Burlington, under the leadership of the Burlington Soil Conservation District Supervisor and Chair Gina Berg, who did have and does have a background in stormwater, the district looked and assessed its capabilities to provide these services and ultimately began advertising this program to municipalities within the county. It was determined that the district staff already possessed the necessary background and expertise to inspect stormwater management facilities. Myself, I have been inspecting construction projects for upwards of 23 years. When I started in '97, some of the projects that I was inspecting had actually started in the late '80s. So, the time period that you get to see these projects stretches back quite a ways. We also decided, and this was another board decision because the board, moves ahead with who to hire. We decided to expand our mapping capabilities by hiring individuals with a GIS and GPS background. So to get started in this pathway, you first want to verify that your district possesses the capabilities to provide the services that you hope to offer, or you're going to have to expand. And this may include additional staffing, because there is a workload should you be successful, mobile devices, Esri ArcGIS subscription, and if you're going to print maps, you're going to need a plotter. After that, you need to identify the municipal officials and decision makers to whom you're going to advertise this program or what you're going to be offering. Remember that these are budget decisions, so timing is important. Here in New Jersey, most of our municipal budgets are formed in January to February, so it's about time for me to get out my annual advertisements. And I typically target public works directors, township managers, mayor's council, that sort of thing. After that, I would hope to meet with those same decision makers who either haven't used our program before or might have questions this year, or they might want to expand what they're looking for. But I want to go meet with those decision makers to discuss our program and to identify the deliverables and the cost elements. Past that, we then draft and execute shared services agreements indicating exactly what we're going to do and exactly how much that cost will be. And then we get to work. So this is an example of some of our GIS mapping that's here on the right-hand side. That is a kind of an age-restricted subdivision. Each of those white squares indicates an inlet that was mapped during our workload there. For that specific required map, we plotted over 900 points. It was larger than just that one little section, incorporating inlets, incorporating basins, basin outfalls, and any other outfall. So the data points for inlets, outfalls, and stormwater basin features are collected using an Esri ArcGIS collector with a cell phone. Typically, I'll carry a cell phone, but it can be done with a tablet. And so in some cases, you can collect the points via aerial imagery. These points are then uploaded directly to an ArcGIS online map and is then transferred to ArcMap, where additional GIS layers such as streams, streets, that sort of thing can be added, and then the maps are fine-tuned for electronic transfer or printing. Completed mapping satisfies the compliance requirements and also helps provide a useful resource document to the municipality. So our basin inspection program actually kicked off before we were ready to go with GPS and GIS, because we already had the inspection component. We began inspecting stormwater management facilities through these shared services agreement in 2018 and carried into 2019 and 2020. So in 2019, we inspected upwards of 500 basins. This year, we inspected about 250 basins, but we also provided mapping services to a couple of townships. Some of those maps, included up to 1,000 points. So these agreements have provided an additional revenue stream, which is helpful. We have to be, like I said, a little bit entrepreneurial, so we have to look for other ways that we can, maintain our finances. We also identified deficiencies that can be corrected and provide for improved stormwater management and water quality. As part of our program, we're providing an inspection report to the township or to the individual private entity that requested the inspection so that they can move forward with correcting any of the deficiencies that were identified. During my inspections, I will generally carry a shovel with me, which helps me kind of maintain balance in some of the wetter, more naturalized basins. But if I come across a clogged outflow structure, that can be easily cleared because there's a red cup in there or a bottle. I'm happy to do so, and that gets the basin functioning the way it should. Our deliverables also include a PDF of the inspection report, generally 5 to 10 photographs of each basin that they can include in their annual report and use for their own purposes. So this is actual copy of our inspection report. Now this I keep on a tablet, but I don't carry the tablet with me into the basins, as I'm generally having to kind of get through some rougher terrain. There's a lot of brush in some cases. Some of these basins are naturalized to the extent that, the trees in there are 20 inches in diameter or so, with a lot of briars and brush that get in the way. So I don't generally carry this on me, but I do carry the cell phone for taking a lot of photographs. So it helps you with my observations. So we're looking at pre-treatments. We're looking to determine, are there standing water, floatables, emergent vegetation, which could be a sign that something is not working properly. Obviously, erosion, channelization. We're looking for animal burrows that might be weakening the basin berm. Sinkholes, low flow channels that are damaged or need cleaning. Basin liners, aerators in your wet ponds to see if they're functioning. We're looking at the stabilization, the vegetative stabilization for the basin bottom, the basin side slopes. We are looking, we're going to observe and record here what type of vegetation is in the basin. Are there trees in the basin? Should there be trees in the basin? Was that part of the design? We're also taking a very close look at the outflow structure or the outlet structure to see if there's a trash rack, to see if there's any damage to the structure, to see if there's water standing in the structure, see if it's blocked. We are also looking at the spillway, the emergency spillway, which is a typical part of most embankment basins, to see if that's obstructed or damaged. And in some cases, many basins will have fences to keep out people. So we're looking to see if those fences are damaged. Are there gates? Is there damage to the gate? So we're looking at all of those facets, and then anything else that stands out to us. And at the very bottom, we will identify whether the basin is satisfactory, whether there's maintenance required, whether there's some needed repair, and if it's a possible retrofit. And we attach our comments and our photographs. Okay, Eric, so at this point, I'm going to look to try to splice in that virtual inspection. All right, so this is a little video I put together using a staff person's drone here at the district, just to kind of provide some idea of what a typical basin inspection would look like. We did this recently, so there is some snow on the ground, but we start doing inspections once the agreements are signed, and sometimes that is as early as March. Some townships wait a little bit, and we don't get started till almost September, which really shortens our timeline. So first thing I'm doing is I'm entering the basin. If there's a fence, that's what I'm doing. I'm going through the fence and the gate, and I'm going to take pictures of each of the structures. I'm going to look at each of the structures as close as I can. Here you see some floatables that have come out of the basin outflow structure. Now, this was an easy basin to navigate because it's relatively flat. There's no vegetation. There's nothing I really have to get through. I do have boots on in case I get in a wetter area. So I just make my way from structure to structure, kind of making some mental notes along the way, taking photographs of anything that stands out. So I'm walking over to this basin inflow structure over on this side of the basin. In some cases, you'll see obstructions in there. There could be a grate that's holding in leaves, and that holds water in the pipe, perhaps under the parking lot. In this case, that's not there. So that's relatively unobstructed. Now we're going to go over and take a look at the emergency spillway. So if water can't get into the basin outflow structure, or there's a larger storm event, basins are typically equipped with an emergency spillway, and that spillway needs to be kept clear so that water can flow unimpeded through and over it. So in this case, that's the gray material. It's riprap. It's usually larger rock. All emergency spillways are not stabilized in that fashion or armored in that fashion, but they can be. And that's the downstream area. That emergency spillway is in pretty good shape. No obstructions were noted. And along the way here, I'm also taking, if we're being engaged by the township to take our GPS points, I'm actually stopping to identify the location of the basin, grab my points for that using my cell phone. Also the basin outflow structure, which I'm walking toward now. There I am still walking to it. So there's a trash rack in front of that basin outflow structure. That's the angled metal there on the front. Looks like a grate. And it's very common for plastic bags, leaves, whatever it might be, to kind of get pressed up against those trash racks by the force of the water trying to leave the basin. So it's very key to make sure they're inspected and maintained and kept free. There's a little bit of obstruction along the bottom there, not terrible. But if I needed to, I can grab my GPS point while I'm there. So where that's focusing now is the basin outfall area. So now I'm going to leave the basin itself and walk around to get to the basin outfall to make sure that there's no erosion at the basin outfall. But again, this was an easier one to reach to. I tried to find something that would hopefully provide a good example, clear example without a lot of brush in the way. And here again, I'm going to take a look at the basin outfall structure to see if there's any impediments at the outfall structure. Sometimes trees will grow up right in front of the pipe, which can artificially hold water back in the basin. And we're going to see a photo of that shortly. So that, as you can see, there is some vegetation growing over it. It's not yet obstructing it, but it is something to be mindful of if you're the owner of that basin. You know, this is a privately owned facility, but we were doing the inspection for the municipality. Some municipalities will pass along a cost to those privately owned basins, and some will take it upon themselves to see that the inspection is done the way they would like to have it done. I'm just grabbing a couple more photos of the downstream area, document that there's no erosion there. Okay, so hopefully, with that virtual inspection, you got a taste or a sense of what we're looking for. And I'm just going to go through and show some examples that I took during, real inspections, different basins around the county here. So you can see over here on the left-hand side, we have an outflow structure, has a trash rack. That white material, that's all plastic bags that has kind of wrapped itself around the trash bags. And every time, another layer gets added on, less water gets through the outflow structure, and that can pose problems. This is a different structure here on the right-hand side where I've tried to clear back some of the material. Most of this is organic based. Leaf clippings, that's a big thing. Most of these basins, they get mowed, but the leaf clippings stay in there. Rain comes, they lift up, they float to the basin outflow structure, and now they're clogging up the structure and holding water in the basin. Same with the leaves. But you can see over on the top here, this is the grate. That grate is open, so the basin will pass stormwater, but not as it's intended to. So it is somewhat impaired. Just some more examples of clogged trash racks. Great intentions with these trash racks. And I think there's a real opportunity if someone can come up with the trash rack that does not cause result in some clogging. This basin here, see, that's basically all algae and vegetative material that's just pressed up against the trash rack. Water level goes down, it dies off, and it's almost like plastic. Same as over here on the right-hand side. Very little water is passing through that, and you can just see all the algae that's kind of sitting in there, and that's what's really causing a lot of the issue. Low flow channels that require cleaning. On the left-hand side, here's a picture of a basin. Here's the outflow structure at the very end where that rectangle is. No evidence of a low flow channel. But if you look a little closer at the structure, and if you look at the structure from the inside, so you're standing on top of it, looking into the grate, typically what I will see is an opening in the bottom that is not passing stormwater. That's an indication that there's a clog, also an indication that there could be a low flow channel. So on the right-hand side, you see that same basin, and I'm looking from behind the outflow structure back into the basin. after some cleaning has taken place, and you can see the low flow channel is now observable. And eventually, when this work is done, it will pass stormwater much more efficiently. You also see in the foreground that the basin has an emergency spillway. Just another example of a low flow channel that's posing an issue. On the left-hand side, you can discern that there is a low flow channel. There's some aquatic type vegetation that's kind of taking hold there. The basin is very wet. If you're walking through that, you need to have boots on. Over on the right-hand side, same low flow channel. Some cleaning has taken place. Municipal crews are actually now able to get in there and do the mowing. It's not recommended that basins get manicured, but a mowing once or twice a year does keep down the woody vegetation. And that is all part of their maintenance plan. So, obstructed outflow structures. So this is how water actually leaves the basin. And on the left-hand side, you can see that there's trees actually pressed up right against the outflow structure. So typically there's a 3 or 5 or an 8-inch orifice there. Sometimes it's larger, but very little water is going to pass through that, given that there's a tree there. Also, you'll see on top there's an inlet grate that's basically covered with pine needles, leaves, tree branches, that sort of thing. Over here, just an example of the size of trees that will grow in some of these older basins. There's a tree here. I never could get in front of that outflow structure just because of all the obstructions. Some water must be passing, but not very much. And on top, it's almost completely obstructed by other vegetation. So just say a typical outflow structure that could be obstructed. On the left-hand side, you may not actually think that there might be something there, but if you look inside the box structure, you'll see that hole from the inside. Just a little bit of shovel work, and now you can see that. And it doesn't take very much to clog that. A typical water bottle, red Solo cup, coffee cup, that's going to clog up a couple leaves, a branch. Doesn't take very much. And then once that's clogged, the basin will go downhill from there relatively quickly. Another item that we're looking for is floatables to see if, and these are some of the really egregious examples. Trash rack on the left-hand side, you can just see the number of plastic water bottles that are impounded up against it. Basin on the right. This is supposed to be a wet pond, so that part is functioning. You can see that there's the grate there on top, but just the amount of litter and floatables, that needs to be addressed, needs to be cleaned. Seems to be a little stagnant there, given the discoloration from the algae. And which is another item that we're looking for in our checklist is the presence of algae. Structural failures. Don't see as many of these. Over on the left, you can see the pipe that came out of this structure. And this is the actual flared end section that has broken off, most likely due to scour erosion below that flared end section. So it's actually dropped off into the waterway there. So it's impounding water in the waterway. It's most likely also resulting in erosion there, because now the elevation of the pipe, which is discharging water, is so much higher than the water surface itself. On the right-hand side, you see there's a flared end section here, and this little circle here of light, that's water, that's sunlight that you can see through the berm of the basin. On the other side of that hole is the basin outflow structure, but the basin outflow structure has become clogged, and so water has been moving laterally along that pipework and exiting the basin without any kind of stormwater attenuation, which is when water kind of holds in the basin. So that basin is failed. It's not holding stormwater, it's not functioning the way it's designed, and it's a real opportunity, a real example of what could happen next, which is a complete blowout of the basin berm. So one of the other things we look for is wildlife. So okay, fine, we might see a nice ecosystem You might see some ducks sitting on the water, some geese, scare some deer out, and that's all fairly harmless. However, if you're looking at a pond on the left and you see ducks on there, and you also see, and you're not sure if the basin should actually be holding water, you have to consider whether there's a beaver issue. And in this case, there was. Beaver look at a basin, it's already an impoundment. All they have to do is clog up the structure, and they're very good at that. So this basin here, completely ponded due to obstructions placed by beaver. Over here on the right-hand side, this is the emergency spillway. This basin is holding water, and instead of water passing through the designed outflow structure, it's now passing over the emergency spillway on a near daily or regular basis. But we call them an emergency spillway because they're not supposed to function to pass stormwater all the time, only in emergencies, only in larger storm events, and not for a very long duration. So that has serious consequences and can cause, and in this case was causing, erosion of the downstream area. So this here on the left-hand side, you can see the water, this is passing over the emergency spillway, and it's starting to erode a pathway down below it. So all of that sediment, that's a pollutant. All that sediment is going further downstream, clogging whatever's downstream and bringing any pollutants with it. Over here on the right-hand side, you can just barely see the grate, which is at the top of the outflow structure box. And all of this material in front, that's been placed there by the beaver. Just upstream of this basin, say 20 yards, is this inlet. That inlet takes stormwater from the backyard of an apartment building, for which you can see that they're installing a French drain, probably because they have water around the foundation. There's too much water around that location. What you can't see here is that there's already standing water in that inlet, and that's because that basin, which I just showed you, is full of water. It's holding about 5 extra feet of stormwater. So if there's nowhere for that water to go, it's going to sit in that inlet. It's going to sit in the ground. It's going to really cause wet conditions, which is not good for structures. One of the attributes that we can lean upon here at our district is we have many of the original construction drawings for these basins. This one in particular was constructed in the early 90s. And you can see basin inflow structures. This right here, this where that B is, that's the inlet I just showed you that's already full of water. You can also hopefully see that there's a low flow channel, concrete low flow channel. And over here, there's a spillway. And this is where the outflow structure is. And the details indicate that the outflow structure should have an orifice much lower than where the standing water is. So we can go and, where I have real questions on how the basin is supposed to function, we can in many instances find the original drawings, discern from that how they're supposed to function, and then compare it to how it is functioning. It becomes a very useful tool in our inspections. So right up here, the basin is just, I cleared a little bit back, just a little bit, so the water would get into the inlet. Now the municipal crews, so this is a municipally owned basin, they went out and did a more thorough job of trying to clear back those obstructions. And that's what that structure actually looks like. So this over here on the left, this top of the grate is actually right up on the top here. All of this down here was obstructed. So once, first step is to remove the obstructions. On the left here, now you can kind of see the size of the basin. Now the basin actually has some storage to hold stormwater, as opposed to previously there was no storage and it was just rainfall in, water goes over the emergency spillway. This is the emergency spillway over here, and you might be able to see that there's some damage there where it had begun to erode. Let me just. So here's a couple examples of well-maintained basins. Again, basins don't have to be manicured, but it's not uncommon for certain basins to get mowed on a every other week type basis, although they don't have to be mowed much more frequently than a few times a year, a couple times a year. This basin here has a little bit of a stormwater quality structure in front of the basin outflow structure, just to kind of settle out some of the fines. Over here, we have a wet pond, has proper aeration, good stabilization around it. Both of these basins are well stabilized, well maintained, functioning properly. A couple more examples. Now, as I mentioned early on, we're located, well, I may not have mentioned it, but we're located near the Pinelands National Preserve in New Jersey. So we do have a number of projects that are actually built in that area. These basins were. And you just see it's a different type of vegetation, less vegetation in some cases, as on the right-hand side here. Typically, we'll have a sand bottom to promote better infiltration. But both of these basins are functioning properly. They're not supposed to hold water, and they're not. So just to recap, the district staff is, we're using staff expertise to offer our MS4 compliance assistance to municipalities at a reasonable cost. This is providing additional revenue to the district, and we are saving the municipalities the cost of hiring additional employees or diverting existing employees or seeking more expensive alternatives such as a private engineering firm. And if there's any questions that you haven't already sent to me, please forward them along now. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Bob and Jan, thank you both so much for sharing this important work of your organizations with us so that others may learn from your experiences. And Bob, I really enjoyed the basin inspection walkthrough. That was really neat, like taking a virtual tour. A big thank you to everyone participating in this session for supporting these great speakers. We hope you found the details shared in this session informative and helpful for your own operations. We also look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Our first general session will begin at 11 a.m. Eastern. And please don't forget to visit the virtual auction benefiting the National Conservation Foundation. The auction will close on Wednesday, February 10th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. So if you see something you'd like, please visit the online auction and place a bid to support a great cause. This concludes our successful district operations session. Thank you all so much for participating.